Hey everyone, welcome to Motor Psychology from wherever you are in the world. If you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back and thank you for your support. In today's video, I'm going to be removing the rear mufflers of this 1977 red Corvette, and I'm going to be replacing them with two brand new identical mufflers. I'm also going to be doing a refresh of the underside of that area, so rear suspension area, underneath the gas tank, and some of the surrounding metals. So I'm going to be refreshing it, scraping off a bunch of rust, and then repainting the frame where I can access it with POR 15. So sit back, enjoy this video. This is going to be part one because it's going to be a long project. And as you can see in the background, I have a whole bunch of other projects on the go. Here I'm having a look underneath the Corvette to see where the muffler is attached to the tailpipe and trying to come up with a plan to get these off. They don't look like they've been off for a long time, so I'm going to give it a quick assessment and then figure out how I'm going to do this. Just to loosen off a couple of the nuts, I'm going to use some penetrating oil 3-in-1. Or I'm going to use some PB Blaster, depending on what works. But I'm going to try this first because it doesn't smell as bad. I just basically sprayed the joint where the muffler pipe connects to the tailpipe. So the clamp and the joint were sprayed with the penetrating oil. The socket size for the muffler is a number 14. I don't know why I gave the socket size for the muffler clamps and tailpipe clamp because they're all going to differ, but in my case it was a metric number 14. And that is what these ones happen to be. So yours will probably be different. The clamps that are on the actual tailpipe are actually pretty new. The ones that are where I'm working, I don't know how old those have been, and they've probably been on there for a long time. I'm lucky that this one is actually working, but you'll see in the other one I have to cut it off. A little bit of background on this car. I'm the third owner. The guy that I bought it off owned it for 20 years. And in that time, probably didn't really drive it that much. And it was sitting around for quite a while. It's in really good shape and it's lightly used, but at the same time, it's old and needs a good refresh. And my goal is to bring this thing back so that it looks good and is safe and it's going to be nice and clean and looking pretty good underneath with new components, cleaned, refurbished components. So this thing will be a nice collectible but drivable Corvette. You can see that it's got a new leaf spring on it, and I put that in last fall. So that's good to go. And now I'm just working on getting this back end looking as good as possible. So as I expected, this joint area is way too hard to get off right now. So I'm going to spray some penetrating oil in there, but that's it. Then I'm going to get the hammer or the mallet. And I'm going to move on to this side here. This is the side I found out pretty fast that I'm not going to be able to get that clamp off with that particular tool. So I had to come up with a different idea. I probably didn't know at this time that I'm not going to be able to get this off with the wrench, but it didn't take me long to figure out that it wasn't going anywhere. Well, that's not coming off, so I'm going to cut it off. That thing in the background that sounds like a chainsaw is actually a super big gas-powered hobby aircraft that my neighbor has. It's actually pretty interesting. He has a few of them. It's a great hobby, but you know, when you're filming these things, you just don't want to have extra noise. But half the time, either somebody's either out there mowing the lawn or doing something else. So what can you do? It actually looks like I got the muffler off, but I just pulled it off from the tailpipe side of it. So I still have to get the connection pipe off. Sucker. It's not going anywhere. That is going to be cut off. We'll see if we can cut that off with the wheel. I have to be careful here because I really only want to cut off that tailpipe extension, which is fitted over the longer tailpipe. So I'm taking my time to make sure that I just cut through the extension that is pressure fitted on top of the other pipe. Also, for some reason, the previous owner had this extension welded on with brass or brazened on, so I'm just trying to cut through that without making any serious damages to the main pipe that I want to keep. Working on cars is great. You get to do a whole bunch of heavy lifting, cutting, scraping, pounding, and banging. Pretty much get to do everything that you want to do with hand tools and power tools, which makes it a lot of fun. Lots of rust dust coming out of this pipe. Couple more, it should be off. I didn't really have to hit it hard. I just had to hit it many times, kind of tapping it to eventually get it to loosen up and pop off. I wasn't really a fan of that sound either. Success. That's off. Gonna grind that down a little bit. Time to get the other one off. Get a better picture from this camera angle that I'm just taking off tiny bits of metal each pass that I do with this cutting wheel. So my goal was not to go into the actual tailpipe, but just to get the extension cut through. And then I'm going to try and split it open a little bit wider and then get it off the pipe. I think I'll be able to pound it off now. I've got a chisel, gonna split that crack open a little bit. Hopefully pull it off. There we go. At least it's going one way. Hope you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. Yeah, it's been a struggle to get this off, and I think I'm almost there. So it's been a lot of banging, a lot of wiggling, a lot of cutting, but gotta be persistent, gotta stay positive. Success. That's what I have right now. Need to clean it up a bit and then put the mufflers back on. There's the new mufflers and the old ones. Okay, just going to grind off some old brass weld here. Just taking off some of that brazen or brass welding that was left on. My goal was to get it flush with the rest of the pipe so that it doesn't impede me putting on the new muffler when it's time to do that. I just ground off a little bit of brazen material on there, and my next step is I'm going to wire brush these things down, wire brush this down, and a few other places, and then paint it. And then when I'm done with painting it, I'm going to install the mufflers back on these raw tailpipes and take it from there. This project is getting larger than I anticipated when I first started. So I've decided I'm going to take off all the surface rust, dirt and dust and crap that's underneath this car. And I'm going to do a way better restoration than just putting on the new mufflers. So when I'm done, it's going to look really clean, really more or less brand new, but it's going to look worth the effort of scraping everything down to the metal and putting it back together. So I figure I might as well do it. Well, I've got everything off and I've got the motivation to get it done. So these jobs can be pretty messy and dusty, so that's why I'm here vacuuming up the stuff and just staying ahead of the issues. An update on the rear end of the Corvette. It's coming along. Looking at some potential paint options. I'm getting a little bit more serious here. I'm taking off some nuts that are holding this sheet metal there, and that will give me access to part of the frame cross member and also behind that, so I can get it nice and clean and give it a good type of restoration that I'm looking for. These hockey pucks are turning out to be pretty useful. I'm just using them as wedges to keep this sheet metal part open. I'm using a needler here that attaches to an air hammer, and it really helps get rid of a whole ton of debris right off the metal. It's a really useful tool if you decide to do this type of stuff. Most of the stuff that you see falling off the frame is just dirt and dried mud that is sitting on top of the frame. So when I use the needler and it vibrates, it's knocking this stuff off that has been sitting on top of it. I did a lot more of this needling than what you see in the video. I basically did the entire rear compartment, top to bottom, side to side. This was also a good opportunity for me to install the last rubber bushing on the leaf spring that I installed in the fall. In the fall, I wasn't able to install the bushing properly, so I just left it for the winter, and now I just decided to get on with it while I had the room and the space and the mufflers weren't in the way. It made getting that particular bushing as far as the suspension on without that much difficulty. So that's what you see me here doing, just putting on the last part of that suspension component. If you ever decide to change your leaf spring, for me the most challenging part was getting the 4 bolts that attach the leaf spring to the differential housing out. They were in super tight, and it took a lot of effort, a lot of heat, a lot of penetrating oil to eventually get them off. But as soon as I got them off, the rest was really straightforward. So if you didn't have those type of issues with it, then it's a fairly simple job. But by far, the longest part of the process for me was getting those 4 bolts out of the differential. So I do have some tips on how to do that, and maybe I'll share that later on. I replaced the bushings with poly bushings for those of you who want to know. I decided not to do rubber, but I'm going to try poly this time. I'm using a small handheld sand blaster to get into some areas that I wasn't able to get into with either a wire brush or with the needler device. So this little handheld sandblaster is pretty useful for those type of things, and it doesn't take long before you can get stuff down to the bare metal, which was exactly what I was looking for in this case. I'm gonna wrap up this video for now as I progress with this, and I'll be moving on to completing, probably putting in new bushings there. Next I'll be wire brushing this, I guess. Solid, just needs to be painted. The reason I need to paint it soon is I stripped all the paint off it earlier this year. I've got to do the parking brake on this as well, so I will be removing the brake caliper. I'm going to restore that. I'll be taking the brake disc off, and then I'll be working behind that on doing the parking brake, which is basically like doing a mini drum brake. That completes this part of the video, which I'm going to call part 1 to the muffler. So what you saw is me taking off these 2 old mufflers, checking out the tailpipe, and getting ready to install 2 new mufflers. At the same time, I'm giving the underside of this Corvette a refresh. So I used a needler, which goes on an air hammer, and the needler looks like this, and it's just something that all these needles just move in rapid succession, and they pound off surface rust and they pound off dirt as well, and they make the job a lot easier. So that helped me get a lot of the underside clean a lot faster than normal. I also used a handheld sandblaster, and I also used a wire brush on a angle grinder as well. So I'm good to go with that. I may do a little bit more. So my intention is going to be to address the frame with POR 15 as well. So I'm getting ready to do that. and all the bare frame and stuff like that is going to be covered with this POR 15 by the time I'm done. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with a friend, and come back and watch part 2. Really appreciate your support, everyone, and we'll see you all in the next one, which is coming very, very soon.